Was magic ever truly real, or just a desperate whisper in the dark, a flickering candle against a rising tide of fear? Did people really fly on broomsticks, or was it just a terrifying delusion? And if they believed it, if they acted on it, what drove them to such extremes? The 15th century smelled of damp stone, wood smoke, and something far more unsettling, a simmering paranoia. Imagine a world perpetually teetering on the edge of chaos, where the line between the sacred and the profane blurred into a sticky, terrifying mess. It wasn't a world of knights in shining armor, but one of crumbling castles, shadowed valleys, and whispers carried on the wind, whispers of pacts made with demons, of forbidden knowledge, and of a darkness that threatened to swallow everything whole. Let's start with Amadeus VIII, Duke of Savoy. A man who, in 1439, decided to declare himself Pope Felix V. Seriously. Picture this, a powerful ruler challenging the authority of the Pope, claiming the throne of St. Peter for himself. It wasn't a subtle move. It was a full-blown, chaotic rebellion, splitting the church and throwing Europe into a frenzy. He was a fascinating figure, a gambler with the fate of Christendom hanging in the balance. But beneath the grand spectacle of papal intrigue, something darker was brewing. Amadeus wasn't just interested in power, he seemed strangely tolerant of magic. He didn't crack down on it, he just let it be, and that's where things got really strange. Savoy, nestled in the heart of the Alps, became a magnet for unsettling events. People started reporting strange occurrences, livestock dying mysteriously, crops failing, illnesses spreading with unnerving speed. But these weren't random misfortunes. They were linked to magic, to rituals performed by individuals who claimed to command spirits and manipulate the elements. And the unsettling thing was, it was working. People were genuinely terrified. Now you might think this is just folklore, a collection of superstitious tales, but the records show something far more complex. The church, usually quick to condemn anything that challenged its authority, was strangely hesitant. They didn't immediately launch a full-scale witch hunt. Instead, they started studying it. They began to dissect the nature of magic, trying to understand how it worked, what fueled it, and what dangers it posed. It was like a morbid scientific investigation, a desperate attempt to contain a threat that was both real and terrifying. This period saw a shift in thinking, a slow but deliberate transformation. Magic, once viewed with suspicion, began to be seen as irrevocably tainted by heresy. It wasn't just about harmless spells or fortune-telling, it was about a direct challenge to God, a pact with evil spirits. The idea of a mutually beneficial agreement between humans and demons, a silent exchange of power, took root, twisting into a monstrous concept of betrayal and damnation. Imagine a world where every action, every whispered prayer, every carefully crafted potion could be interpreted as a step towards eternal darkness. That's the atmosphere that gripped Europe. The church, already weakened by internal divisions, the Great Schism, with rival popes vying for control, saw magic as a symptom of a deeper malaise, a reflection of the spiritual decay that threatened to consume the entire continent. And it wasn't just the church. Secular courts, surprisingly, were often more severe than the ecclesiastical ones. While the church might offer a period of penance or a hefty fine, secular rulers were more likely to resort to brutal punishments, torture, imprisonment, and even execution. There's a chilling record of a procurator fiscal in Cologne issuing a formal warning on April 4, 1489, demanding that anyone suspected of practicing magic be brought to justice. Let's talk about Louis, Amadeus VIII's successor. He was a man of peculiar passions, a devoted flute player, more interested in melodies than in the turbulent politics of his duchy. France was growing increasingly powerful, casting a long shadow over Savoy, and Louis seemed utterly oblivious to the shifting tides. His wife, a French noblewoman, effectively ruled in his stead, navigating the treacherous waters of European diplomacy with a cool, calculating mind. The geography of Savoy played a crucial role in this strange dynamic. The Alps, with their towering peaks and deep valleys, created a natural barrier, isolating communities and fostering a sense of independence. It was a place where ancient beliefs and traditions could thrive, shielded from the influence of the centralized church and the burgeoning forces of the modern world. It was a haven for those who clung to the old ways, for those who believed in the power of spirits and the efficacy of magic. But isolation also meant vulnerability. Without strong central authority, these communities were susceptible to outside influences, to the spread of dangerous ideas. And as the church grew increasingly convinced that magic was a gateway to demonic possession, it launched a relentless campaign to eradicate it. Enter Nicholas of Cusa, a theologian who, in 1431, delivered a chilling sermon warning against the worship of false idols, in this case, spirits. "It is not lawful for anyone of his own authority to add to or subtract from those things established by the Church for the worship of God," he declared. Likewise, it is a superstition when worship is paid to another cult rather than to God. It is, in fact, idolatry. Therefore, it is idolatry to make a pact with evil spirits, to sacrifice to them, and to accept advice from them. Imagine hearing those words in a small, dimly lit village, where the only source of light came from flickering candles and the fear in people's eyes. It wasn't just a theological debate, it was a declaration of war. The rise of conspiracy theories added fuel to the fire. The Jews, often depicted as demonic figures in medieval art, were accused of collaborating with Antichrist to destroy the church. Blockbook Vitae illustrated manuscripts depicting the life of Christ showed him surrounded by demons from his very conception. It was a world saturated with paranoia, where every shadow held a sinister meaning, every rumor fueled the flames of suspicion. And then there were the women. The narratives of the Sabbat, accounts of witches gathering in secret to perform dark rituals, consistently depicted women as the driving force behind these gatherings. They were portrayed as seductive, manipulative, and prone to fits of uncontrollable rage. Theologians and physicians alike attributed women's carnality, their perceived susceptibility to temptation, to their vulnerability to demonic influence. Think about it, women often held less power than men in medieval society. They were subject to the authority of their fathers, their husbands, and their lords. The idea of a woman breaking free from these constraints, wielding power over others, seemed almost too fantastic to contemplate. It was a dangerous fantasy, a tempting escape from the limitations of their lives. The Sabbat, with its promises of abundance, unrestrained sex, and the opportunity to dominate, offered a seductive alternative, a chance to rewrite the rules, to seize control, to defy the established order. Heinrich Institoris's Malleus Maleficarum, The Hammer of Witches, published in 1486, became the definitive guide to witch hunting. It codified the beliefs and practices of the time, providing a framework for identifying, interrogating, and punishing suspected witches. It was a chillingly detailed manual, a blueprint for the systematic persecution of those accused of practicing magic, but the story doesn't end there. As the 14th century drew to a close, a remarkable shift began to occur. Scholars, driven by a growing interest in rational thought and a desire to understand the workings of the universe, started to question the prevailing assumptions about magic. They recognized that magic wasn't simply a bizarre and irrational phenomenon. It was a manifestation of the underlying forces of nature, a reflection of the interconnectedness of all things. Joseph Hansen, a German scholar, meticulously collected and translated a vast array of documents, seeking to unravel the history of witchcraft beliefs. He argued that the concept of witchcraft had a long and complex history, developing over centuries and ultimately coalescing into a single, coherent notion by the end of the 15th century. George Lincoln Burr, another American scholar, took a different approach, arguing that the theory of witchcraft was imposed upon society by religious authorities seeking to maintain their power and influence. Hansen and Burr, despite their differing perspectives, both recognized the importance of studying the sources firsthand, of listening to the voices of those who had been accused of practicing magic. The key, they realized, was to move beyond simplistic explanations and to grapple with the underlying psychological and social forces that had fueled the witch hunts. They sought to understand why people believed in magic, why they were willing to accuse others of witchcraft, and why the church and secular authorities were so eager to suppress it. It's a fascinating paradox. At a time when the church was desperately trying to eradicate magic, scholars were beginning to see it as a legitimate expression of human consciousness, a reflection of the universe's hidden workings. They recognized that magic wasn't necessarily evil. It was simply a different way of understanding the world, a way of interacting with the forces that shaped human destiny. The rise of rationalist scholarship, a movement that emphasized reason and observation over dogma and superstition, challenged the prevailing worldview. As Europe underwent a period of rapid social and economic change, driven by technological innovation and the rise of mercantilism, the old certainties began to crumble. The church, once the unquestioned authority on all matters of faith and knowledge, found itself increasingly challenged by new ideas and new ways of thinking. The persecution of witches, once a widespread phenomenon, gradually declined as secular rulers realized that witch hunts were often based on flimsy evidence and could easily be manipulated for political purposes. The science of the age, with its emphasis on observation and experimentation, began to offer alternative explanations for natural phenomena, diminishing the need to invoke magic or demonic intervention. Christianity, once a force for order and stability, began to lose its grip on the collective imagination. The idea of a benevolent God intervening in human affairs was replaced by a more mechanistic view of the universe, a view that saw everything as governed by impersonal laws. And yet, despite the decline of witch hunts, the belief in magic didn't disappear entirely. It lingered in the folklore of rural communities, in the whispered tales of strange occurrences, and in the enduring fascination with the occult. So, was magic ever truly real? Perhaps not in the way that we typically imagine it, as a collection of spells and incantations, but in the sense that it represented a fundamental human desire to understand the world, to connect with the unseen forces that shape our lives, and to transcend the limitations of our own mortality. Is it possible that the fear of magic wasn't about fearing the supernatural, but about fearing the unknown, the unpredictable, the things that lay beyond our control? And perhaps in a way that fear still lingers today, in the shadows of our own anxieties and uncertainties.